Hey guys, it's Alexander, and today I am talking about my DIY slider build. Let's go. So as you guys may know, I recently purchased a red Epic Dragon, and I am so stoked to bring this on set and shoot some really awesome footage. I picked this up online for a great deal and I just could not help but buy it. So now I'm trying to upgrade or at least build some really cool gear that I can use with this heavy camera on set. One of the first things that jumped out at me was that I really wanted to have a slider for this camera. This camera is already pretty heavy, coming in around 5 pounds plus extra for just the brain. And I wanted something that I could use that was really professional looking, that was heavy duty, but also didn't break the bank, that would get me some really cool, amazing cinematic shots. I went online and I did a Google search and I found out that sliders, while they are not super expensive, obviously lenses cost more, these sliders, these Dana Dollys do cost quite a bit of money. Some of them range between $400, between $800, and even above that. And for me, I am on a budget. Buying this camera at this time in our economy was really difficult for me, and so I needed to save every penny that I could and do this on a budget. So I went ahead and I built my own DIY Dana Dolly slider. So here were the things that I was looking for in this slider build. I wanted something that was professional quality, that felt really robust, heavy duty, that was steel, that could really hold the weight of a cinema camera setup. You know, the camera, the cinema lenses, the batteries, the monitors, the whole shebang. I wanted something that could really hold this weight and give me some confidence in this. I know that it's not going to break down on set. So for me, professional quality that was heavy duty was top notch. Secondly, I wanted something that actually looked good, that looked decent. I don't want to bring a dolly that I made on set that was wood or plastic or looked really cheap. I wanted this to really say or sell itself on set. I wanted it to look really good, high-end professional steel. And so that was my second requirement. And my third, budget. This build needed to cost less than $100, or at least around that price range. And for me, that was good enough. So here's what you'll need: a large steel plate, an optional smaller plate for a hi-hat, bolts, nuts, washers, all of various sizes. You'll need some long rails that are around 1 inch in diameter that could be used as dolly track. You'll also need perforated slotted steel angle, an optional flat steel bar, optional spray paint if you want it to look nice, and last but not least, skateboard wheels. Now most of this stuff you can just buy from your local hardware store. It could be Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever is nearby for you. I don't know, I'm based in SoCal. That's what I have nearby. But what I recommend is that you buy all the steel for this build at your local steel mill. Not because I have some kind of thing against Home Depot or Lowe's, but because the price difference is gigantic. The cost of steel at Home Depot or Lowe's is so inflated, it is insane. It's not even worth it. Compare it to what you'd get at your local steel yard. The prices there are way cheaper, they are way friendlier, and they'll even cut your steel for a minor price. So I feel like that is way worth it. Now the skateboard wheels you could buy from a skate shop, but to be honest, you have two options. You can go to Amazon, which you can probably find a really good budget friendly deal, or you could also go to a thrift store and find a used skateboard and just use that for whatever cost that might be. So whatever fits your budget and your level of effort, I say go for it. For me, I kind of lucked out. I built a DIY wooden dolly, funny, about probably 10 years ago. I watched a YouTube video. I built this giant wooden dolly. I used skateboard wheels and most of the stuff for this build on that. And so for me, it didn't look that great. The shots were just whatever, and it was honestly too big for me to even lug around on set. So I stopped using it and I went ahead and tossed that in my garage for almost a decade. Now, when I got the red, I realized, hey, I need something that is professional, that is cinematic, but also compact. And for me, I pulled out that old slider and I gutted it for all the skateboard wheels, the dolly track that I had, and also the perforated slotted steel. And so I just repurposed all that for this build. So for me, that was a huge budget saver, but I promise you this stuff is still really inexpensive at Amazon, your local steel mill, or even Lowe's if you have to go there. Now, you could do this build with wood. It would probably be a lot easier for you to use. However, I feel like that defeats the purpose here. For me, my goal was to make a professional, heavy-duty looking slider on a budget, and I feel like I accomplished that. Here are some tools that you'll probably need: a power drill with drill bits that are made for steel, a manual hand saw to cut the steel, or if you have a miter saw, you can just buy a steel cutting blade, which is what I used. And lastly, you'll need some kind of sanding tool. I used an angle grinder because I already had that, but you could just as easily use some heavy grit sandpaper for this steel. Now, I used a welder to weld my skateboard wheel / track to the base of my slider, and I actually regret that. I wish I would have just bolted it. It would have been way simpler. It would have been way easier. And to be honest, I overestimated my skill level as a welder to accomplish this build. I'm sure if I had more experience as a welder, this probably would have turned out great, but I was not happy with my welds. And so for you guys, I just recommend that you bolt this thing together. You have your steel base, which is where the tripod head sits on, and then you have the wheel track that attaches to the base that allows the slider to sit on the track. And so for me, I welded that skateboard track to the base of my slider, and it just made things more difficult. It was a longer process. I wasn't happy with my welds because I'm still learning how to weld. So for you guys, again, I recommend that you bolt this thing together. Don't use any welding. Don't get fancy. Just keep it simple. Ideally, you want all the steel that you use for this build to already be cut to size, or at least a relatively useful size. And that's why I recommend going to your local steel yard, because they have a lot more options for you than Home Depot or Lowe's. Ideally, you want the base that your tripod head sits on to be a really thick steel. For me, I used 3/16. I felt like that was a really thick steel. It gave me confidence knowing that like this thing can definitely hold the weight of a heavy camera, and you want it cut to size because cutting steel is not the easiest thing in the world, but you can find useful sizes in smaller formats. The steel base that I used for this build was 12 by 12 inches, and then I built an optional hi-hat for my camera, and for that I used a 6x-inch steel base as well too. And all of those were pre-cut to size for me at my local steel yard. Next, for the main base of your slider, that steel base, you'll want to drill your tripod threading hole right in the center. And for that, that is a 3/8 hole. That is the standard tripod head size. And so you want to measure the sides and the width to find the exact center point and drill there with your metal drill bits. And that way you can have your tripod head attached to the base really easily, or if you want, you can still have the hi-hat on top. So next you'll want to cut your perforated steel to size, so that way it fits your slider base perfectly. And this is what the skateboard wheels are going to attach to at an angle that will allow them to easily glide across the dolly track. Next, you'll want to attach your skateboard wheels to the perforated slotted steel. For this, you'll want to use a roughly 2-inch bolt that matches the same thickness of your skateboard wheels. It took many times of trial and error to find the exact distance and length and tightness to get the best connection for the wheels to the slider, but also to get the smoothest movement of my slider on the track. And so for this, you want to go ahead and match up the skateboard perforated track to your slider base. That way it lines up perfectly, and then you want to probably clamp it so it doesn't move and then drill through it. Unfortunately, I don't have a video of me doing this because I actually welded mine, but again, I regretted doing that. And so this is my recommendation to you guys, that you bolt this together. It's probably way easier, and it gives you the freedom to remove this at a later time. So again, I recommend that you bolt this, not weld this. So now if you want to add the optional hi-hat to this, you want to take that smaller plate. Again, I used a 6x6-inch steel plate, and just like how we did with the bigger base of the slider, you want to find the center point of this. And so drill a hole in the exact center of that smaller base. That's going to be your hi-hat, and then line that up with your steel base. So that way both of the center holes are lined up perfectly. You could put a bolt through them, that way it doesn't move or shift. And then secondly, you want to go ahead and drill a hole in each of the 4 corners of the hi-hat base. And you want that hole to go all the way through your bottom 12 by 12 or whatever size you have slider base. And that way you can have some bolts come up, and that will raise the hi-hat as high as you want it to go, or at least as high as your bolts will let it go. And remember, you want to use a bolt that is thick enough to give you the confidence that this can hold the cinema camera. And secondly, you want to go with a long enough bolt that will actually make it worth having the hi-hat. If it's a 2-inch bolt, you're not going to get much of a difference in your perspective. I used a 6-inch bolt. I would have preferred to go bigger, but that was the max that I found at my hardware store. So next, this is also optional too. I went ahead and I mounted a steel bar to each of my Dolly track, and that way it just makes it one big piece, so I can grab it and go, and it's going to be mounted together. This is optional. You don't have to do this. It will probably make it more compact if you didn't do this. I just thought that it made it look more professional, so I went ahead and did this. Again, 3/16 of an inch is perfect for this. And so once it's all lined up perfectly, you want to clamp it together with either some A-clamps or even like a vice grip, whatever you may have. That way this does not move. And then once it is clamped together, you want to drill your holes through the Dolly track, through the actual bar, and then put a bolt through that and keep it together nice and tight. That way this becomes one solid piece. Again, this is optional. You don't have to add this steel bar. I did it because I thought that it made it look more professional, and it really kind of just finalized the build. So you don't have to do this. It may make it more complicated, but for me, going the extra mile made it worth it. So once this is all put together, you are good to go. You have 2 options. You can either paint this thing a color that you want, or just start shooting. Get out there, make something really cool, and show me what you got. And guys, that is it for today. Please give me a thumbs up or a like if you enjoyed this video or this build. And guys, I will see you next time.